the pinnacle of ridiculousness for the new Core Ultra 9 285K. Okay, yes, you could put other CPUs in this, but why would you? This is the Z890 Godlike. This is probably the highest end Z890 motherboard you can get. Look how thick this motherboard box is. It's insane. Look at this absolutely ridiculous box. There's the motherboard. And then you get accessories, accessories, accessories. How cool is that? That's for your PCIe Gen 5 M.2 when you run out of slots on the board. So obviously we got to go over the top and add those crucial T705s to this build, right? 4 terabyte ones. You've also got your Thunderbolt add-in card, which does take auxiliary power because these ports can do charging. There's also 2 full-size DisplayPort in. This is really nice because you can connect your GPU, your 5090 that I'm assuming that you're buying to go with this build, into DisplayPort in, and then boom, Thunderbolt 4 out. Let's take a look at the board itself. All right, so your interface here, it's magnetic. That's covering your 24-pin power, auxiliary power input, USB Type-C for your front panel, another actual USB Type-C, 4-pin fan header, got 2 more 4-pin fan headers here, addressable RGB. This is a Godlike, so you've got test point headers here at the top, 2 8-pin power for your CPU, lots and lots of heatsink here at the top edge, and then your easy release, which will make it easy to install and remove your graphics card. Just for the primary slot, the other slot has the traditional rocker release. Now this thing is going to get fancy once we get this into a build and get it put together. But you've got a USB 2 header. The front of this actually is also a wiring harness. Now in terms of rear I/O, I think you're going to be pleased. 6 10 gigabit Type A ports and 5 USB Type C plus 2. So Thunderbolt 10 gig, 10 gig, 10 gig, USB-C 20 gig, that's 2 by 10. Then you've got another USB-C 10 gig and another USB-C 10 gig, 2 more 10 gigs just above that. You got a BIOS clear button, a clear CMOS button, and a smart button, which is programmable. Your 10 gig NIC, your 5 gig NIC, your Wi-Fi 7 antenna connectors, optical SPDIF, and then analog in and out, 3.5 millimeter. This is the most packed rear I/O ever. This is very nice. It better be for the price, huh? The middle is also quick release. So you got 4 more M.2. Plus, you've also got some pogo pins here to connect to the RGB features. Tons of thermal pads here. Love the toollessness. And then your primary M.2 here for Gen 5, also with the pogo pins for the RGB connections. It's giving you a little warning here that you got to remove your M.2 heatsink in order to get to your mounting holes, which is right there when you're going to mount this motherboard. Now, will this motherboard unlock 10% extra of performance of your Core Ultra 285K? The answer is no. The MSI's own Tomahawk for the Intel platform will give you just as much performance for the Intel CPU, the Core Ultra 285K. But you won't do it in as much style as you would with the Godlike. I mean, it's pretty crazy, right? Okay, let's get this thing in a build. Let's use some really insanely fast CUDIMMs and go from there. CUDIMMs, basically an Intel-only technology at the time that I'm making this video. If you want 121 gigabytes per second, CUDIMMs are how you're going to do it in terms of memory bandwidth, and the Intel platform can do that. And 121 gigabytes per second on the Intel platform, yeah, it's pretty easy to do with CUDIMMs, especially on a motherboard like this. So this is the system that I ended up with building around the Godlike for the Core Ultra 285K with overclocking. I haven't added the Thunderbolt add-in card yet because I wanted to show you a couple things. It's really neat. DisplayPort and then your USB Type-C ports. The display ports are DisplayPort in, as I said, and I've tested this machine with both the 5080 and the 5090, which we'll talk about in just a second. The idea is that your DisplayPort out from your 5080 or 5090 would go into this, and then this would give you Thunderbolt, which is actually kind of awesome. But Thunderbolt is limited compared to DisplayPort 2.1, so you would only do this if you're okay with a maximum of 4K 240 Hertz. I'm doing some other monitor testing, so I've left that out. You've also got the M.2 expander card, which I think MSI could sell in an enterprise context. This thing is really neat. It doesn't give you hot plug. You should never take this out while the computer is on, but you can put an M.2 in here. This acts as a heatsink. It has cooling, but how cool is that? You can just swap an M.2 at the back. As a practical matter, how much M.2 swapping are you really going to do? But it's neat nevertheless. Because the slot placement is the way that it is, this bottom slot, that's 8 of your PCIe Gen 5 lanes. It moves toward the bottom of the slot. Big part of the cost of the motherboard here is actually PCIe 5 redrivers. That is an expensive component. And so in this configuration, my GPU, my 5080, 5090, is only getting 8 lanes. And then it's by 8, by 4, by 4, sometimes the bifurcation that you see us refer to, goes to our M.2 expander. And then this goes through the chipset. This doesn't bottleneck through the chipset because Intel's actually got a pretty great 8-lane wide layout for their chipset. They take 8 PCIe lanes, take it to their chipset, and then break it out from there into slower devices, including slower M.2. So your other motherboard M.2, those are PCIe Gen 4, those are through the chipset, except for the main M.2, which is also Gen 5. And I'm running a Crucial T705 in here, 4 terabyte, because again, high-end, ostentatious build. Now I gotta get my cables managed, I gotta put this together, but I've also gotta, I can't fully cable manage it because I need to be able to swap the GPUs. I need to swap in AMD's latest and greatest. I need to be able to swap in Intel's latest and greatest. I need to be able to swap in different models of 5080 and 5090. But using this system for a few days with the 5090 in it, it is a breathtaking performer. It is amazing. I was also curious about how much of a difference 8 lanes versus 16 lanes make. And so I ran a couple of benchmarks with a couple of different games. As you can see here, there's really not a huge performance difference. We're also using the MSI 360 liquid cooler, and so the part of the performance is the temperatures. How are the temperatures doing? Well, as reported by Hardware Info 64, everything was basically in check. Now, if I were going to do extreme overclocking, I would actually probably use a beefier cooler, and I don't really like that I've configured this with like tubes up. You want some kind of a rotation, but I was also experimenting with 256 gigabytes of memory on this motherboard, and the tubes were kind of encroaching more than I liked on the memory DIMM slot area. So I put it tubes up for now to just be able to do some experiments with 256 gigs. MSI has been working on their 256 gig support with things like the Kingston 256 gig kit. That's 4 64 gig DIMMs. I still think if you're gaming and overclocking, 96 gigs of memory with is the sweet spot, because you can get really high performance 96 gig kits. 128 gigs is on the horizon, so 2 64 gig DIMMs would also be possible, as long as you can get a low CAS latency, high performance memory. And we're almost there, but right now the 96 gig kits of memory are a much better deal, much less expensive, and a little bit faster than the 64 gig kits that are available as a practical matter. So in here I've got our G-Skill 96 gig kit, and it's, I think, DDR5 8600, 8400, something like that, text on screen in case I misremember. But very fast, very nice, very satisfactory system. This is pretty much the highest end Intel Core Ultra system that you can build right now, bar none. So yeah, a lot of fun. We can use that on the test bench just to be like, your best case scenario for Intel is this, or this, as I should say. So this has been a fun build and a fun look at the absolute most extreme high-end motherboards that you can get for the Intel Core Ultra 2 processors. It would be a cardinal sin if you put an i5 or an i7 in this motherboard. I mean, come on, Core Ultra 285K. I would maybe be okay if you put a 285 non-K in here because it's such a strong processor, but again, it's only a 65-watt processor. Splurge for the K and maybe do some experimentation. If you're not going to go for the K, you could get a less expensive system. And if you look at the total cost of the system and you're thinking, I don't really game that much, I need more productivity, you might look at like Xeon Workstation or be tempted by the Book of Threadripper. I don't know. I'm Whittle, this is Level 1. I'm signing out. You can find me in the Level 1 forums.